Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to Monday Night Live. It's always a great privilege and a joy to spend time with you and just share the goodness of God. Thank you for joining in and being a part with us. I have an exciting guest this evening, so you don't want to miss. Every word that's going to come from my guest is going to be life-changing for you, for your future. And I want you to stay tuned. But I want to remind you of our services on Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. And then, of course, you're watching us on Monday night. And you can watch us on Sunday morning on any of the apps that you're watching on tonight. Whichever one you're watching on, do that. You that have the capability of sharing this program with others, why don't you do that? And I believe you will be blessed for giving others the opportunity to hear what you're going to hear tonight. My guest this evening, I've known for a number of years. Very, very lovely individual, has written a book, and this book is touching the lives of multitudes of people. Actually, I know my guest and her husband, and I've known them, as I said, many years. The title of this book is Communication IQ. You know, I think communication is one of the big things that's missing in our world today. Good communication and knowing how to communicate. And I've learned a lot from my guest about how to communicate with my wife and others, and I believe you can too. My guest this evening is Kendall. She and her husband has authored this book, Communication IQ. And they're known nationally and internationally. And that's big because what they do, it comes from the revelation that God has given them to help people communicate better and understand others, see from other people's perspective. And so I just want to read just a little bit of the bio here about who they are. I can explain it to you, but I'll read it to you here. They're known internationally as experts in communication and relationships. Wow. Do we need help in relationships today? I'm amazed. But this book takes you to a place where you can understand yourself better so you can understand how to communicate more. They've offered their expert advice as hosts on interviews and guests more than 800 television shows and radio programs, including Dr. Phil, Good Morning America, and many others. And they've been the catalyst for creating and developing perfecting the 7 life languages. Now, I'm not an expert on any of this, but I've got an expert sitting next to me. And my guest this evening that I've known a number of years is Kendall. Kendall, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, Don. I'm so glad to be here. We haven't done this for a while, so this is great.
Well, I've been trying to get you for a long time, and you're so busy.
I know, but today's the day. Tonight's the night.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
It is. Well, you know, I kind of feel a little strange sitting over here because the first time that you and I did something together, you were the host.
That's right. It was a radio program.
It was.
Yes.
And you hosted that program, and you invited me to be your guest.
Right.
And so you had a radio program and show here for how many years?
Oh, I don't even remember. Probably 10 or 12. And I loved it because it was live. And there's something exciting about doing live television or radio. You know, there's just an excitement with it. And you came on and so ministered to the people. So it was wonderful. Was that in the 70s?
Yes, it was.
Okay, yes.
So that's how long we
have known each other a long time.
I wasn't going to say that, but since you did, yes, it was in the 70s that we knew each other.
But you know, there's something about friendships that last.
It is.
Through the decades and the changes in life all around us, and the friendships stay. That's what is so precious about the Lord.
Well, you know, I fell in love with you and Fred the first time I met you, and your husband, Fred. Oh, I could just sit here and reminisce over things that he said and done over the
Yes.
years. And, as you know, he's a Marine.
That's right.
I mean, he's not in active duty, obviously.
But once a Marine, always a Marine.
Always a Marine. And, I don't think Fred ever met a stranger.
No, I don't think so either. Even today, we go to restaurants, and he has to go around and say hello to most of the people there.
Oh, I know. I've been with him,
Yes.
and I've watched him sometimes just get up and go. And,
Yeah.
and you know what? It's so good because he just knows how to communicate.
He does. He does.
Well, tell me, Anna, about this book and why. Well, I'll tell you, let's go back just a little bit about you and Fred
Okay.
getting married and what your life has been like. Your wife, your mother, your grandmother.
I'm a
and-
great-grandmother.
Oh, a great
Yes,
grandmother.
yes, right.
Wow. Well, we're on
Yes,
the same page
we are,
then.
absolutely. Yes, well, Fred and I have been married almost 60 years. And we, at one time, had one of the worst marriages of anybody we know of. And, which through the years has given us tremendous faith to believe for other people's marriages. Because seldom, in all the years of counseling that Fred did, seldom did we see anyone whose marriage was as bad as ours was.
Oh, my.
Fred was right off active duty in the Marine Corps when we got married, and he was very in charge. And there was one way to do things, and that was the Marine Corps way. And I was so attracted to Fred because he was responsible and he was predictable and he was just so dependable and he was a strong person, and I was attracted to all that. He had just come back from Southeast Asia, and he was attracted to me and my love for life and my spontaneity. So you can imagine what happened when those two things got together. He's trying to control me, and I'm trying not to be controlled. So it's sort of like a chase that goes on. He's trying to change me into a good recruit, and I know that my purpose is to resist. So we had that kind of dynamic tension going on, and it sort of didn't get better. It got worse, and then it got worse, and then it got worse. And the more Fred was in charge and controlling and demanding, the more I was rebelling. And to the point that I decided that most of my problems were because of Fred. And if I could just get rid of him, I knew life would be better because there wouldn't be that criticism and that trying to control. And, of course, he felt like if he didn't control me, I was going to jump off the end of the world or something because of my spontaneity. So, anyway, we had all this stuff going on. And he got transferred from Texas to California with this company that he was with. And life was just better with him gone. So I decided, now we were not Christians. Fred had been saved as a child, but hadn't really lived, in the kingdom. And I really wasn't saved. I knew Jesus like I knew Abraham Lincoln. I knew of him, but I didn't have that personal relationship, and I didn't understand it. So anyway, Fred goes to California, and he meets a man called Demas Shakarian, who was in charge of Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship. And before I know it, Fred has received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and he's ready to come home and save our marriage. Well, in the meantime, who I met was a man that I had an affair with, and I was ready to end the marriage. And God told Fred, if you will go back to Texas and you will do the things I tell you to do, I will save your family and I will save your marriage. So Fred comes home telling me what God has said, and I don't know that God can speak to anybody. And he's telling me all this, and I said, well, I can tell you one thing. I don't want God to save my marriage. I'm happier without you. And he said, he had a script, and he said, Anna, I want to love you, honor you, provide for you, protect you all the days of your life. You are not my enemy. And Don, I would look at him and I'd say, I can tell you one thing, you're my enemy. And the sooner you're out of my life, the better. That was the amount of encouragement he got. So Fred started going to all these churches where people believed in the power of God, and he got in all these prayer groups. And so he was going from Bible study to prayer meeting, learning how to speak the word, believe in the supernatural. And I was just getting more and more miserable. I had sold our house, moved in an apartment with our son. He moved in with us, and he got a really tough attorney and said, I want you to know that I don't want a divorce. I don't want a divorce. I want you to do everything you can to prevent it. But if Anna and her attorney are determined to get a divorce, I don't want to give her anything. I don't want to reward her for destroying this marriage. And I was like, you can't do that. This is America, USA. I get half of everything. And he said, I will fight you, and I've got the money tied up. And he says, you don't have any money to do this. And so my attorney then said, Anna, you probably need to back up, save some money, figure all this stuff out. And so what God was doing was he was providing time so that he could get through to me. People that I knew were becoming spirit-filled, and they would say, Anna, God was to save your marriage. So one day, Fred and our son Michael had gone to church, and I sat down in front of the TV with a glass of wine, and I was going to watch an old movie. And a pastor comes on, and he says, I'm going to tell you how to get to heaven. And he said, you can't get to heaven on your husband's faith. You can't get to heaven on your mother's faith. And he said, failure to choose is a choice. If you have failed to choose Jesus Christ, you've made a choice. Wow. And he said, there's only two approaches. You're over here with Jesus, or you're over here with the devil, and you will spend eternity in hell. Don, I got so scared. I did one of those foxhole prayers. And I said, God, if you're there and you hear this, I'll try this Christianity thing that Fred's talking about, but I want you to know I don't believe. And the amazing thing to me is that God and Fred took me that day at my level of commitment. We moved from Houston to Dallas. God put us in a community of spirit-filled believers. They started taking us places where we could get prayed for and healed and delivered. And the next thing I know, I'm buying a Christian bookstore. and life just turned around. It really took a couple of years for all of the healing to take place, but we continued on the path. And I look today and I see my husband as truly my hero. It would have been so much easier for Fred to walk away. He was young. He had other choices, you know. But God gave him an ability to fight for the marriage, which was beyond, I think, human feelings. I think God anointed him to do that because I was not lovable, and he kept right on loving me. I was trying to reject him, and he just walked through that and just stood there and fought for the marriage.
Well, you know, when I hear you talk about that and Fred, of how he gave his heart and life to Jesus, and then you're sitting in front of the television set, and you're realizing that maybe this is something I need to do.
Yeah.
Maybe you begin to check yourself a little bit.
I think you're right, Don.
And when you begin to check yourself, and you made the commitment that you could at the time that
which was very little,
and didn't understand really what you was doing. Now, take me from there to where, you know, 2 years later, you bought a bookstore. So tell me how in that process you began to give in to what Fred was doing, his love he was showing you, the kindness.
And that's the big thing, Don, because prior to that, Fred had been controlling and demanding.
That's what I was going to ask. Had he backed off of the control part?
He became gentle and understanding. And previously, if he didn't like the way I loaded the dishwasher, he'd complain about it. And he'd say, you don't have all the things together, the forks and the knives and everything together.
Goodness.
And I would say, I've done it creatively. You know. Anyway, now, if Fred didn't like it, he would just do it. He wouldn't complain. He just started.
Did that bother you when he would go do it?
No, it amazed me. It amazed me. He just started looking for ways to serve me. And he said, Anna, I want to create a marriage where you can blossom and become all that God's created you to be.
Did you think he was faking, or did you think he was he had really had an experience?
You know, I got trapped because I couldn't get the divorce, and so I was trapped for about a year and a half and couldn't get out of this marriage. And Fred would take the tapes of the Bible, these were the old cassette tapes, and put them up to the door of the bedroom because I would lock him out. And he would play tapes of the Bible all night, having to get up and turn them over. We went through the Old and New Testament with him doing that. Then we went through Derek Prince and Deliver Us from Demons. So all this time, you can't stop the word from going in. Even if I'd put, the pillow over my head, you still get the word in your spirit. And I saw that Fred had become a caring husband and an involved father. And all of that started breaking away all the hardness of my heart as I started seeing him. And it all started making me move further and closer to the Lord and further away from the world. And then we started getting healing and counseling. And so, the whole world opened up to me that there really is a supernatural world out here, and God's doing amazing things. So Fred became my hero because he truly fought for the marriage and fought for our family. And I know it would have been easier to walk away. I'll tell you this real quick, Don. Fred's parents in New Mexico, they've never had a divorce. No aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews. They've had murder, but no divorce. Now, my family, there was lots of divorce. So it was kind of a way of life in my family. And in Fred's, it wasn't. You just didn't get a divorce. His mother and sister came to see us in Houston when all this battle was going on. And they said, Fred, I think you ought to just give Anna her divorce. You're ruining each other. You're still young enough that you could find somebody else. You can still have a good life. We don't like divorce, but we think you ought to do it. God gave Fred the most amazing thing to say. He said, let me ask you, Mom, if Anna was back there at our house and she was in the bedroom and she was dying of cancer. And I said, she doesn't cook anymore. She doesn't clean the house. She doesn't take care of Mike. She doesn't want to have sex. She doesn't want to do anything with me. I'm just going to divorce her. I'm young enough to find somebody else. What would you think? And they said, well, we'd think you were terrible. He said, what Anna has is worse than cancer.
Wow.
He said, I may be the only one who's going to fight to get her into heaven.
Oh, my. What a powerful statement plus an example of love.
Exactly.
And for you to make that turnaround, Anna, I'm in my brain. I'd never really heard this story.
Oh, okay.
As long as I've known you,
Right.
I've never really known the depths of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Fred. I know
Yes.
I know he is very strong, a very handsome man, a very opinionated
Oh,
man.
yes.
And good man.
Yes.
But I didn't know that side of the marriage and the struggle that y'all had. So now, how did you start submitting to Fred, and how did he do that in the sense of not being controlling to still be the head of the house?
Oh, I think it was getting in the presence of other teaching. And I remember the first time my spiritual mother said, Fred, Anna has a headache. As the head of the family, you need to come over here and pray for her. And it was like, what? The head of the family? I was such a feminist. I didn't know the man was the head of the family. I had to learn everything. But they started taking us to Christ for the Nations and churches where they taught the Word, like your church, and places where we could get immersed in the Word of God. And I learned that submission and obedience bring blessings. And I thought, that's a no-brainer.
Wow.
That is a no-brainer to want disobedience and lack of some rebellion and not be blessed. So I just started learning the practical side of, what God's Word says.
Well, did you feel like that little by little you're desiring to give him affection and attention? Explain that to me. Because I hear people say, well, we just fell out of love.
Oh, yes. And I think that's a good line. But, love is what I learned. And because I felt like love was a feeling. I didn't love Fred. I wanted to get rid of him, get this other guy, or who knows what I would have done. I discovered that love is so much more than a feeling. It is a decision. It is a commitment. It is a covenant. Feelings come and go, but that decision, that covenant is what gets you through. When I first said, I'm going to work at my marriage, and I said this to God, and I thought, I don't know that I physically love Fred anymore. And God said, start acting love.
Wow.
Start showing love.
Wow.
Start being affectionate. And as I did that, Don, it probably took 3 weeks maybe before I knew how much I loved Fred. But I had to start the action before I got the feeling.
Well, I think that's one of the things that people don't understand, that love is not a feeling.
No.
And, I tell people your feelings don't have any intelligence.
No, they don't. Yes.
And, you have to give them.
Yes.
You have to tell your feelings how they're supposed to feel.
Yes.
And I know that sounds strange, but again, so many people are led by their feelings
Yes.
and by their emotions, and
Yes.
decisions are made emotionally.
Most of them.
And
yes.
you were making emotional decisions based on Fred's actions and what he was doing, and
Yes.
didn't realize how you could change that.
I know. That was just amazing to me. And when people,
And you didn't want to change it.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And so that was a big hurdle, that it took someone like Fred with his character qualities to get me through that. Till I got a new revelation about love and about marriage. I think Fred got that from his family, but somehow I
Wow.
didn't. And
Well, I see him with a calm tenacity.
yes, absolutely.
And he was kind of like that, like a bulldog, so to speak,
Yeah.
even though he's not aggressive in it, but he just decided,
Yes, he did.
I'm not going to let this go. I'm
Yes.
not going to let it go.
And I tell you, Don, the big thing that God told him is, Anna is not your enemy.
Oh, wow.
The devil, it's like in the Marine Corps, you've got to know who the enemy is.
Exactly.
You can't just go out and shoot anybody. You got to know who the enemy is. So God revealed to him who the enemy was. The enemy was the devil, and that's who wants to destroy your marriage and family.
Wow.
And Fred kept that in mind. And it took me a while to learn that.
Well, as you begin to grow and your marriage came together, and again, as I said, I've never known the depths of this story. I always knew you and Fred as two lovebirds
Yes,
that
yes.
you cared for each other, and
Right.
always together, always ministering together. I didn't know you until after y'all were ministers. So once y'all started ministering, what was the thrust of your ministry? How did God get you into ministry?
When it first started, some people heard our testimony, and they started inviting us to speak at places like Full Gospel and things like that. And then I had the bookstore, and people would come in.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well,
now.
we
Why
bought-
did you buy a bookstore?
It just seemed the thing to do, but I know that God had a plan with it because I had to read all those books, So every night I'd go home with a stack of books that I'm, trying to figure out which is the best prayer book and the faith book and the overcoming book. And I would read these books so that I could tell people about them who came in to buy books. And it was like I went into graduate school. But people started inviting us to speak, and we would share our testimony, and then we'd pray for healing. And then Fred went into the full-time ministry, and we started our ministry, which was to marriage and family. And he had probably counseled 10,000 people during his years of counseling, from the 80s up until maybe about 5 years ago.
Well, before we get into the book, what would you tell somebody that, whether it's the male or female, that was like you right now in their marriage, and they feel like there's no hope for it, and they don't want to fix it?
I tell you, when I got the revelation that this lifetime is like the snap of a fingers compared to eternity. I heard an example one time of someone, if you took a rope from the tip of South America and took it all the way to the tip of North America, and about in the middle you put a little period. That is this lifetime compared to eternity.
Wow.
It is so unimportant, but yet it is so important because it determines our eternity. The most important thing about this lifetime is where we're going to choose to spend eternity. I got that revelation, and I thought, there's just got to be a way to convey to people that marriage, you don't just throw it away like garbage. Maybe things are not going well for you, but God can change that. The creator of the universe. He changed me, he changed Fred, and it just gave us so much faith for people with their problems. And they would come with problems, multiple marriages, multiple affairs, abuse, addictions. And I'm not saying that every marriage got healed, But I can tell you a lot of them did when people got out of themselves, got into the kingdom of God, and saw that God's world was so much bigger than ours, and He has a purpose here. And if we can just latch onto His world, we're going to get through this one and get to the next one with great glory. And that revelation changed me.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to you talk and just thinking about experiences that I've had with people over the years. Fortunately, Sharon and I have had an amazing marriage.
You two are the lovebirds. You are the example of lovebirds.
It is. I mean, it's been amazing.
You guys are awesome.
Just in a few weeks, it's going to be 62 years that we've been
goodness.
married.
Yes.
And fortunately, we could communicate. We had the same likes, and we're very compatible.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people are not. Like
That's
you
true.
said, you're over here and Fred was over there.
We
And
were
there's
not. Yeah.
probably most people are. I mean, I would say less are like Sharon and me than
That's true. That's true.
than the other way, because I think opposites attract.
I do too. Yes.
And so when I see so many people that I used to counsel. I don't do that anymore.
Right.
But I would see where one was coming out of obligation, and the other one was coming to fix the problem. And the one that came out of obligation was blaming the other.
Oh yes.
And you said you didn't fix every problem. Obviously, you can't, because the person has to fix themselves.
Exactly.
Just like you had to fix yourself, but Fred was patient.
Yes, he was.
How can someone that's going through similar to what you went through, how can they realize they're not being abused? And then we're not talking about abuse.
Right.
Abuse is
Yes.
on the other side of the coin.
Exactly.
Did you ever feel abused?
No, I didn't. I felt controlled, but I didn't feel
There's
abused.
a big difference.
There's a big difference. And if there is abuse, we would often recommend that people separate to get healthy, to get healed from the abuse. We never had said, well, you got to stay in an abusive marriage, where you could be beaten to death. But as people would separate and get health, we have seen them come back together because God changed them. So no, I never felt abused, but Fred and I were very, very different. So after God healed our marriage, we still didn't know how to communicate, Don. We thought we did because we can both talk a lot. See, we thought we talk, we communicate. No, we were not communicating.
Oh, that is so good. That is so good what you said. You thought you were communicating because you were talking.
Yeah.
But who was listening?
Yeah, nobody was listening. We were both talking all the time. So that's how we got into these 7 life languages. We started, trying to understand. And Fred would say, well, I was counseling this couple today, and it's like she speaks Russian and he speaks Greek and nobody communicates. And we'd say, well, that's kind of how we are. So as we started, trying to figure this out, what the Lord gave us first was three what we call three categories. We call them IQs. So 3 people, everybody communicates from one of these 3 categories. They speak first emotively, they speak first intellectually, or they speak first kinetically, acting out.
Now do those again.
Okay, there's the emotive languages. They feel first. There's the cognitive languages, they think first. And there's the kinetic languages, they act before they're aware of what they're feeling or thinking. Now, we all do all of that. We just do it in descending order. And when we saw these three categories, we felt like I speak emotively, Fred speaks action kinetically, and then our son spoke cognitively first. So we had those 3 categories, and we played with those and talked to God and prayed and prayed. Then we started seeing some differences. Like in the emotive languages, there are those who just love everybody, and they just have passion and feelings about other things, about everything. And then there's the other who they're more public with it. They're more public speakers. They're more, like politicians, but they're both emotive. So we saw, okay, there's 2 languages under the emotive category. Then we found there was 2 languages under the kinetic, the ones get out there and make things happen. There's the movers, who's lead, follow, get out of the way, and there's the doer who keep things going. They keep the wheels of progress going. But they're different, but they're both action-oriented. Then the Lord showed us there were 3 cognitive languages. Those who are going to think and plan and project and have a big worldview. Then there are those who manage things very well. And then there's those who think and think and think and think and are probably the smartest of all, but won't necessarily tell you what they're thinking. So we saw, and then we're saying, God, what does all this mean? Well, about that time, we were co-owners of a psychiatric hospital chain, and we had a psychiatric hospital in Fort Worth, one in Santa Fe, and one in Newport Beach, California. So we got our spirit-filled doctors and therapists to talk about all of this, and one of our psychiatrists was also getting a degree. He already had a couple of medical degrees. He was getting a degree at Dallas Theological Seminary, and he said, Anna, let me tell you what I think you all have done. He said, I think God has brought you through the back door, and you have been spending all these years figuring out the 7 motivational gifts of Romans 12.
Wow.
Now, Don, if we had done that to start with, we would have said, no. Theologians know more about that than we do. You know, look at Marilyn Hickey and all these different people who've taught on the 7 motivational gifts. And what the Lord showed us there is there are the 7 motivational gifts are from God the Father, and that's what we've been working on. Romans 12. Wow. Then there's the 5-fold ministry, and that's the giftings of Jesus Christ. And then there's the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So you've got the 3 giftings from the Godhead. We were discovering the giftings of God the Father, like His DNA, the way He created each of us. We have all 7 of the languages. We have all 3 of the categories. We just have them in descending order. And often one person's first language might be the wife's last language. And they love each other. They just don't know how to communicate. Or maybe that's one of your children. You have a hard time communicating with that child. You love that child as much as the others, but it's harder. Well, once you understand the languages, then you know how to bridge that. You know how to speak that language. We had to learn how to speak the language of our son because he was not a communicator, but incredibly bright. But we learned how to do that. And so as families, as husbands and wives, as church staff, as businesses learn to do this, what they do is they affirm each other, they release each other, they support each other to be who God created them to be, and instead of being critical, they learn to just really celebrate the differences, because the differences make us who we are.
Well, you know, you have said a lot there in those few minutes about the different gifts, you know, the motive gifts, and then of course you're talking about the 5 ministry gifts, the
5 ministries of Jesus, yes,
and then the 9 gifts of the Spirit,
Holy Spirit, yes,
and then you compiled those and put those together and brought them into the life languages that you're talking about.
Yes.
Now, how do you get started in a person? You know, you said like you and Fred. Both of you talked, and your son was a thinker, and he didn't talk much. Did you ever look at him, or Fred look at him, because he didn't talk much before you knew? And
we thought he was from another planet. And to tell you how bad I was, it was like, I mean, my first language is influencer. It's an emotive language. So influencers are positive. They're very affirming. They're encouraging. They see steps of solutions for people. My son would come in with a problem, and I'd say, well, honey, I know what that problem. You didn't get up in time this morning. You ran out the door without your homework. You forgot your lunch money. So, of course, you had a bad day. Now, I wasn't listening to him. And what he might have been saying was, I had a bad day because Johnny hit me.
Wow.
See, you have to learn to speak their languages. Our son came home from college one time, and I said, you want to have friends over? You want to have a party? You know, because I like people. And he said, no, I just want to come home. Fred said, you want to do something? Fred is action-oriented. You want to go out and do something? We can go hiking. You know, what would you like to do? And he said, I just want to come home. So Fred and I said, okay, we're going to just spend the evening with him. We're going to put a fire in the fireplace, turn off TV, hide the mail, hide the newspapers, hide the books. And we're not used to, I would say, tell me what you've been doing, who'd you see, what's been, no 20 questions. We're just going to sit there. So the three of us are sitting on the sofa. And suddenly Michael says, sure good to be home. And we say, it is sure good to have you home. And then we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And we're about to chew our nails or, but we're not going to say anything. And he said, I've been thinking a lot about Enoch. And I'm thinking, Enoch, who? I've never heard him mention a kid named Enoch. And he said, I think Adam was still alive when Enoch was on earth. And he said, I actually believe Adam actually mentored Enoch. And that's how Enoch got so close to God that he was just translated right into heaven. What you miss when you don't allow space for contemplators to speak. Do you see how we just about ruined this child because we were always...
I couldn't imagine, number one, the conversation and how you and Fred, what did you think when he started saying
We were just amazed. We were amazed. And we just praised him. We said, that is tremendous. That's you using this amazing mind that God has given you to further understand the Scriptures. So we were very affirming, and then we asked him to teach us more. And he said things like, when I was little, I thought the Holy Spirit was kind of like Casper the Friendly Ghost, and he just kind of slid in through the keyhole. But he said, I understand now that the reality of Jesus is stronger than the reality of a wall. And Jesus walks through the wall because that's his reality. Now, isn't that amazing?
Wow.
But see, we talked all the time and didn't hear these things growing up.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your testimony. I've just been so blessed by hearing all of the things that you have gone through and how God brought you through such a change in your life. This just shows us God's love when we're willing to give in to what He has to say. I've been teaching for several weeks about how to be obedient and what obedience does. And when you finally yielded to the Lord, Anna, and let God change you, that is a miracle. Now, I'm here to tell you that next week we're going to finish this. This is just so powerful. I want you to stay tuned next week. And we're going to go into more things talking about the book, because this book is absolutely one of the greatest books that you could ever read about yourself, learning about yourself and learning how to treat other people. And I want to thank Anna for coming here, but we're going to pick this up again next Monday night. So why don't you share this on your Facebook page or YouTube, whatever app you're on. You share this and then be prepared next week to tell other people to tune in for the second part. Anyway, it's been so good being with you. Don't forget, now this Sunday morning at 10 a.m., our regular church service, 10 a.m. Central Time, we want you to be a part with us. Now, if you'd like to support us, we'd certainly appreciate any support that you could give to help us with the ministry. I know you have your internet and you have what you watch us on, but it costs us a lot of money to do what we're doing. And we'd appreciate anything you could do to help us. Also, make sure you get Anna's book on communication. This is a book, as I said, that will change your life if you will allow it to. Just like Anna was changed, God will change you. Anyway, once again, it's been a joy being with you. Don't forget again, I want to remind you this Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time, right here from our ministry center. God bless you, and make sure you tune in this Sunday and next Monday night.